Instead of candles and laughter, my birthday became the moment when everything I thought I knew about my family began to unravel. It happened at Rossi's, a cozy Italian restaurant just a few blocks from my home in Charlotte, North Carolina. My son Marcus had chosen it because he knew how much I loved their chicken parmesan and the warm, inviting atmosphere. Soft amber lights glowed over wooden tables, and the smell of garlic bread drifted through the room. Families chatted over wine, couples shared quiet dinners, and for a while I felt wrapped in comfort. Sitting across from me was Rachel Moore, my daughter-in-law. She smiled politely, though something about her expression had always struck me as stiff, almost rehearsed. I tried to brush the thought aside, reminding myself it was my birthday and I deserved joy tonight. Marcus poured red wine into our glasses, his eyes glimmering with affection. "Mom, you look radiant tonight," he said warmly. My heart swelled with gratitude. Rachel lifted her glass as well, her hand trembling slightly. "To Diana," she said, her voice calm yet strangely strained. "To a very special mother-in-law." I felt a pause before the word special, a hesitation that gnawed at me. Still I raised my glass with a smile, determined not to ruin the moment. And then, just as I was about to sip, a young waitress approached our table. Her name tag read Emily. She leaned in, as though to wipe the corner of the table, and in one swift, discreet movement, slid a folded piece of paper next to my plate. Neither Marcus nor Rachel noticed. Her eyes met mine for a brief, urgent second before she walked away. I slipped the note under the table and unfolded it with trembling hands. My stomach turned cold as I read the message written in rushed, clear handwriting. "Don't drink that, your life is in danger, trust me." The chatter of the restaurant faded into a distant hum. The glass of wine in my hand suddenly felt like a loaded weapon. I forced myself to keep my face calm, hiding the storm inside. Marcus and Rachel kept talking as though nothing had changed, but for me the world had shifted entirely. I excused myself, saying I needed the restroom. In the stall, I stared at the note again, my heart racing. Was this a cruel prank, or was I truly staring at death in a wine glass? The sincerity in Emily's eyes told me the answer. When I returned, I knew I had to act without revealing anything. As Marcus reached to flag down a server for more bread, I made a quiet, decisive move. I switched my glass with Rachel's. Minutes later, when we lifted our glasses again for another toast, Rachel unknowingly drank from the one meant for me. And in that instant, the course of all our lives began to change forever. Rachel set her glass back on the table, smiling faintly as if nothing had happened. Marcus leaned closer to me, telling a story about a project at his office, but my eyes stayed fixed on Rachel. I watched her closely, waiting for any change, any flicker of discomfort that might confirm the waitress's warning. At first, everything seemed perfectly ordinary. She forked a bite of Caesar salad, nodded at Marcus's joke, even offered me a small smile as if she wanted to reassure me. For a fleeting moment I wondered if I had overreacted, if Emily's note was nothing but some strange mistake. But then, 5 minutes later, it began. Rachel's hand moved to her stomach. Her smile faltered, replaced by confusion. "I don't feel right," she muttered, her voice shaky. Marcus immediately stopped mid-sentence, his eyes filled with alarm. "What do you mean? Are you okay?" Rachel shook her head, pale color spreading across her cheeks. "Maybe it's something I ate earlier," she whispered. But her body told a different story. Her hands trembled violently now, the fork clattering against her plate. Sweat gathered on her forehead, though the restaurant was cool. The moment stretched into chaos. Rachel tried to stand, but her knees buckled, forcing her back into the chair. Her breathing grew ragged, shallow gasps that drew the attention of nearby diners. A hush fell over our corner of the restaurant, followed by a wave of panicked voices. "Someone call 911. I heard myself say, my voice strangely calm. Marcus wrapped his arm around his wife's shoulders, his face etched with terror. "Hang on, honey, just hang on." Emily, the waitress, appeared again, this time not discreet but purposeful. She guided another server to bring water and a towel, her eyes locking with mine for the briefest second. It was not the look of surprise, it was recognition, confirmation that what she had feared was unfolding exactly as she expected. Rachel's condition worsened quickly. Her lips turned an alarming shade of gray, her head slumping against Marcus's chest. Patrons at nearby tables stood, some pulling out phones to record, others whispering in shock. The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder until red and blue lights flashed through the restaurant's front windows. Paramedics rushed in, their presence shifting the atmosphere from confusion to urgency. They worked swiftly, checking Rachel's vitals, securing her on a stretcher. Marcus clung to her hand, his voice breaking as he begged her to stay with him. I stayed seated, frozen in place. My hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly they ached. The glass Rachel had drunk from still sat in front of me, its surface smudged with fingerprints, a silent witness to the truth I was only beginning to grasp. And as they wheeled her out through the crowded restaurant, I knew with chilling certainty that the drink meant to end my life had found its way to her instead. The ride to the hospital felt like a blur of flashing lights and muffled voices. I sat beside Marcus in the back of the ambulance, his hands clutching Rachel's as if sheer force of love could pull her back. The paramedics moved with calm urgency, securing tubes and checking monitors, their clipped words confirming what I already knew deep inside. This was not an accident. When we reached St. Mary's Medical Center, they rushed Rachel through swinging double doors, leaving Marcus and me in the waiting area. The sharp scent of disinfectant filled the air, mingling with the distant echo of intercom announcements. I lowered myself into one of the stiff plastic chairs, my fingers brushing the folded note still hidden in my pocket. Those 5 words, "don't drink," that felt like a lifeline. Marcus paced in tight circles, his face pale with fear. "I don't understand," he kept saying. "She was fine earlier. Maybe it's food poisoning, or maybe she's allergic to something." His words tumbled out desperately, searching for a logical explanation. I wanted to tell him the truth, but I knew it was too soon. Until I had answers, I couldn't shatter his world with the possibility that his wife might have meant me harm. After what felt like hours but could only have been 40 minutes, a doctor appeared. He was young, with tired eyes and a beard shadowing his jaw. "Mr. Whitmore, Mrs. Whitmore?" Marcus leapt forward. "Yes, I'm her husband. How is she?" The doctor hesitated, a sign that news would not be easy. "She's stable for now," he said carefully, "but her blood work shows extremely high levels of digoxin." Marcus frowned in confusion. "Digoxin?" "It's a heart medication," the doctor explained. "In normal doses, it helps regulate heart rhythm, but the amount we found in her system is dangerously high. It didn't get there by accident." The words hit me like a blow. I pressed a hand to my chest, steadying my breath. Poison. The glass had been poisoned. Marcus's voice cracked. "Are you saying someone tried to hurt her?" The doctor's eyes flicked between us. "I can't make that determination, but I can say this much: it was intentional, and we'll need to notify the police." My stomach tightened as the truth crystallized. The poisoned wine had never been meant for Rachel. It had been poured for me. Marcus dropped into the chair beside me, his hands clutching his head. His eyes were wide, unfocused, as if he were trying to rearrange the pieces of a puzzle that refused to make sense. "Rachel doesn't even take heart medication," he whispered. "Why would this be in her system?" I hesitated, the folded note burning like fire in my pocket. The truth pressed against my lips, but I held it back for one more moment. Instead, I asked softly, "Marcus, has Rachel seemed different lately?" He blinked at me, caught off guard. "Different how?" I lowered my voice. "Anything unusual, her behavior, the way she talks about me, about my health?" Marcus leaned back, his expression torn. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "A few months ago, she started saying she was worried about you. She told me she thought you were getting confused sometimes, that maybe we should consider options." "Options?" My voice cracked despite my effort to stay calm. "You know," he said quietly, "maybe looking into professional care, a nursing home." He swallowed hard, his guilt plain on his face. "She showed me articles about dementia, signs to look for. She said she noticed you repeating yourself, forgetting things." My heart clenched. I thought back to those moments, Rachel's gentle corrections, her soft reminders that I had told the same story twice, her pitying smile when I stumbled over a word. I had begun to question myself, to wonder if perhaps age was catching up faster than I wanted to admit. Marcus rubbed his forehead. "She even suggested I talk to you about letting me help manage your finances, just in case. She said it was only precaution." I sat in silence, the reality unfolding like a sinister blueprint. Rachel hadn't just tried to poison me in one reckless act. She had been preparing the ground for months, weaving a narrative of decline, planting seeds of doubt in Marcus's mind, and even in mine. At last I pulled the note from my pocket and handed it to him. His eyes scanned the words, his face draining of color. "Mom, where did you get this?" I told him everything about Emily, about the warning, about the glass I had switched. With every word, the enormity of Rachel's betrayal grew heavier. Marcus's voice cracked as he whispered, "So it was supposed to be you?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, Marcus, it was meant for me." By the next morning, the police were involved. A detective introduced herself in the hospital waiting room, Detective Laura Hayes, a tall woman with streaks of gray in her hair and eyes that missed nothing. She spoke with calm authority, the kind that made you believe she had seen nearly every form of deception and cruelty before. "Mrs. Whitmore," she began, "we've received the toxicology report from the ER and I'd like to ask you some questions." I glanced at Marcus, whose face was still drawn and pale, before nodding. "Please go ahead." Detective Hayes pulled out a small notepad. "The doctors confirmed your daughter-in-law ingested digoxin. That medication isn't something you'd find casually in a kitchen cabinet. Do you know if Rachel had access to prescription drugs?" Marcus shook his head quickly. "No, she wasn't on any medication. She was always health-conscious, careful about what she ate." But Hayes's gaze lingered on me. "Mrs. Whitmore, did you notice Rachel bringing you any food, tea, or pills recently? Anything unusual?" The question sent a chill through me. I thought back to the lunches Rachel brought over, the herbal tea she insisted would help me relax, the vitamins she encouraged me to take when I complained of feeling tired. I swallowed hard. "Yes," I said slowly, "she's given me tea, soups, even supplements." Hayes nodded, jotting notes. "That fits," she murmured. Then she looked directly at Marcus. "We've also learned that Rachel once worked as a certified nursing assistant before she married you. She would have been familiar with medications like digoxin." The words landed like a thunderclap. Marcus's mouth opened but no sound came out. He stared at me, then at the detective. "Are you saying she knew exactly what she was doing?" Detective Hayes's tone was measured but firm. "I'm saying she had the knowledge and the opportunity." We also searched her belongings from the restaurant. Several pill bottles were found in her purse, labels scratched off. "We'll be sending them to the lab." I felt the air leave my lungs. Every suspicion, every uneasy moment I had brushed aside, now snapped into grim focus. Rachel had been laying the groundwork with meticulous care. Marcus finally found his voice, hoarse with disbelief. "She's my wife. Why would she try to hurt my mother?" The detective didn't answer right away. Instead, she closed her notebook and met his eyes. "That's what we're going to find out. But I'll tell you this, cases like this are almost never about love. They're about control, or money, sometimes both." Her words echoed in the sterile waiting room, heavy and undeniable. Rachel wasn't just a frightened woman who had made a mistake. She was a woman with a plan. Detective Hayes arranged for me to meet the waitress who had slipped me the note. The next afternoon, in a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria, Emily Carter sat across from me. She looked younger than I expected, barely in her 20s, with nervous eyes that flicked around the room before settling on mine. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said softly, "I'm sorry if I frightened you at the restaurant, but I had to warn you." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You saved my life. Tell me how you knew." Emily's eyes glistened. "Because I recognized her, Rachel Moore." My chest tightened. "You knew her before?" "Not directly," Emily explained, "but 2 years ago my grandmother Clara was admitted to a care facility after what we thought was early dementia. She was 78, sharp as ever, until suddenly she started forgetting things, getting confused. We thought it was natural decline, but I always felt something was wrong." Her voice wavered, but she pressed on. "At that facility, one of the caregivers was a woman named Rachel Peters. Same face, same eyes, your daughter-in-law, only with her maiden name." I felt the room tilt slightly as Emily's words sank in. She continued, "My grandmother died within 6 months. They said it was heart failure, but Grandma had never had heart problems before, and I remember Rachel always bringing her special teas and vitamins." Emily's voice cracked. "I was too young, too scared to push harder, but I never believed it was natural." Detective Hayes leaned forward. "Emily, why were you at Rossi's that night?" I followed her, Emily admitted, shame and determination mingling in her tone. "When I saw her with you, Miss Whitmore, and the way she looked at your wine glass, I knew she was about to do it again. I couldn't stay quiet." Tears pricked my eyes. A stranger had cared more about my life than the woman who had married my son. Marcus sat stiffly beside me, his jaw tight. "My wife," he muttered, unable to finish. Emily met his gaze with raw honesty. "I know it's hard to hear. But if I hadn't said something, your mother wouldn't be here." Silence hung over the table, heavy and undeniable. In that moment, I understood the depth of Rachel's deception. She hadn't just plotted against me, she had a history, a pattern, maybe even a trail of victims. And Emily, carrying the grief of her grandmother, had become the only reason I was still alive. When Detective Hayes told me Rachel had regained consciousness, a chill ran down my spine. I wasn't sure I wanted to see her, yet part of me knew I had to. If I didn't face her now, the questions and doubts would eat away at me forever. The next afternoon, Marcus and I walked down the hospital corridor beside the detective. The air smelled of antiseptic, and each step felt heavier than the last. A uniformed officer stood guard outside the room. He opened the door, and there she was, Rachel, propped up in bed, IV tubes in her arms, her face pale but her eyes alive, with something far colder than weakness. The moment she saw us, her expression shifted into practiced vulnerability. "Diana," she breathed, her voice thin but calculated. "Thank God you're okay. I was so worried." I stayed near the door, refusing to be drawn in by her performance. Marcus moved closer, torn between love and horror. "Rachel," he whispered, "what happened?" She shook her head weakly. "I don't know. Someone must have poisoned us both." Detective Hayes stepped forward. "Mrs. Moore, we've reviewed toxicology reports. The digoxin wasn't in Diana's system, only yours." Rachel blinked, her mask faltering for a split second. But then tears welled in her eyes, too perfectly timed. "That can't be right. I would never hurt Diana. She's like a mother to me." I couldn't stay silent any longer. My voice was firm, colder than I felt inside. "Stop lying, Rachel. You tried to poison me." Her eyes flicked toward me, and for the briefest instant, the mask slipped. Behind the tears was something hard, calculating. But then she forced a weak laugh. "That's absurd. Why would I ever want to hurt you?" Marcus's voice broke. "Because you convinced me my mother was losing her mind. Because you pushed me to get power of attorney. Because you said she needed to be put in a home." Rachel's tears vanished as quickly as they had come. She sat up straighter, her tone sharpening. "Marcus, I did that for us. For our future. Do you really want to spend the next 20 years babysitting your mother while she declines?" Her words sliced through me. "I'm not declining," I said sharply. "My memory is fine. The only thing failing here is your facade." For the first time, she glared at me with undisguised hatred. "You stupid old woman," she hissed. "You should be grateful. I was giving you an easier end than most people get." The room fell silent, her words hanging like poison in the air. Marcus staggered back, horror etched across his face. Detective Hayes closed her notebook with deliberate calm. "Thank you, Mrs. Moore. That will be enough." As we walked out, my legs trembled, but my spirit felt stronger. I had looked into the eyes of the woman who tried to erase me, and I had survived. The days that followed felt like stepping through a fog that slowly grew clearer with each sunrise. Rachel was moved from the hospital to a holding facility once she was stable enough, charged formally with attempted murder. Detective Hayes kept us informed, her steady presence a reminder that the nightmare was being transformed into justice. The evidence against Rachel grew overwhelming. The bottles found in her purse contained not only digoxin but also other cardiac medications. Investigators traced her work history and uncovered troubling patterns. Several elderly patients under her care had died unexpectedly, each case dismissed at the time as natural causes. When the case reached court, Marcus and I both testified. Reliving the restaurant scene under oath made my hands tremble, but I refused to hide the truth. Emily also stood before the jury, her voice steady as she told the story of her grandmother's decline. The jury listened with wide eyes, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Rachel's defense tried to paint her as a caregiver overwhelmed, a woman who snapped under the weight of responsibility. But the evidence of planning the forged papers, the internet searches about poisons, the insistence on controlling my finances told another story. She hadn't snapped, she had calculated. The verdict was swift and clear, guilty on all counts. Rachel Moore, once the woman I thought might be part of my family, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The day the sentence was read, I felt no triumph. Instead, I felt a strange emptiness. Justice had been served, yes, but nothing could restore the months she had stolen from me, the fear, the doubt, the creeping suspicion that I was losing my own mind. As we left the courthouse, Marcus reached for my hand. His grip was strong but trembling. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he whispered. "Sorry I didn't see her for what she was." I squeezed back. "You see it now," I told him gently. "That's what matters." For the first time in months, I felt a weight lifting. The danger was gone, the lies exposed. It was time to begin the harder journey, the one toward healing. After the trial, I realized I couldn't stay in the same house where Rachel had visited so often, bringing me tea and soup laced with her poison. Every corner of those rooms felt tainted, every drawer and cupboard carried the echo of her deception. So I sold the house and moved to a small cottage near Lake Norman, surrounded by trees and open sky. The first morning I woke there, I stepped onto the porch with a cup of coffee and felt something I hadn't in months. Peace. The birdsong, the stillness of the water, the smell of damp earth after rain. It was as if life was quietly reminding me that survival wasn't just about living through the worst, but about finding joy again afterward. Marcus began visiting every Sunday. We cooked together, something we hadn't done since he was a boy. At first there was guilt in his eyes, but as weeks passed it was replaced by gratitude. In therapy we learned to untangle the knots Rachel had tied between us. He told me once, "Mom, I thought believing Rachel meant I was being a good husband. Now I know I was failing as a son." Emily Carter also became part of my new life. We met often for coffee, sometimes walking by the lake. She shared her dreams of finishing nursing school and specializing in geriatric care. I offered to help with her tuition. It felt right, an act of gratitude for the life she had saved, and a tribute to the grandmother she had lost. Healing wasn't a straight line. Some nights I still woke up gasping, reliving the moment Rachel's eyes turned cold. But each morning I rose again, planting flowers in my garden, turning soil with my hands, and choosing life, over and over. Looking back, I see how close I came to losing not only my life but also my dignity and the bond with my son. Rachel nearly convinced both of us that I was slipping into confusion, that my independence was fading. She nearly stole everything I had worked for. But she failed. What I gained from this ordeal is something no one can take away: the certainty of my own strength. At 62, I discovered that survival isn't just about escaping danger. It's about reclaiming your voice, your worth, and your place in the world. I'm no longer afraid of growing older. I know now that age does not equal weakness. Age means wisdom, resilience, and the courage to see through lies. To anyone listening, if you ever feel like your reality is being questioned, if someone makes you doubt your own memory, your own mind, pause. Listen to that inner voice, protect yourself, and never be ashamed to seek help. Today, I live surrounded by peace, with my son by my side and new friendships that remind me life can bloom again, even after betrayal. My story is not one of defeat, it's one of survival. And every morning I wake up free, clear-minded, and in control of my life is the sweet revenge against those who tried to silence me. If this story touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need strength today, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to The Art of Revenge for more true life stories of